a very warm welcome to Shangri-La at the Shard and to this, our July Tech Series event on the future of coding. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Kate Daniels. I'm the head of public services here at esynergy. Excuse my voice, I had rather too much fun at the weekend. And for those of you who are new to esynergy, we're a tech consultancy specialising in assembling small teams of experts to deliver data, application and platform solutions to clients in highly regulated industries like government, insurance, fintech and banking. Our focus is always on identifying and measuring the value that those solutions are going to deliver for clients. So this event is part of our tech series, which is our flagship event, and it's open to everyone in our community. We cover different topics every month, and we invite insights from experts and thought leaders in the field. Thank you to all of you for registering and submitting in advance lots of thoughts and questions on today's topic. So just a bit on format for today. The session is being live streamed. So we're privileged to have a short introduction with insights from our honoured guest, Dan Terhorst-North, followed by a 45-minute panel with our experts from the field and 15 minutes of Q&A. We will aim to incorporate some of the questions that have already been submitted into the panel discussion. But if there's a burning question that you had, please do raise it at the Q&A session at the end. So that everyone in the audience and on the live stream and watching recordings can hear your questions, when it comes to Q&A, please do wait for the microphone before you give us your question. The session's being recorded, so if you're supposed to be somewhere else, leave now. No, if you really have an objection to being recorded, if you let us know that, and we'll make sure you're not included in the recording. Everyone who's registered will also have access to the recording, so don't feel like you've got to scribble loads of notes or anything. If you want to go back and check names or check exactly what somebody said, it's all going to be there for you. So now, it's my honour and privilege to introduce you to Agile troublemaker, proud developer, the originator of BDD and deliberate discovery, my friend and a great friend to esynergy, Daniel Terhorst-North.
Thanks, Kate. Figure out how far to hold this from my face. I don't want to do a big thing here because I want to get onto the panel and hear what other people have to say. I do feel I want to kind of make a few opening remarks, if you like, about kind of developer productivity and DevOps engineering excellence. That's great. I'm going to riff slightly on esynergy. I don't think esynergy is a technology company. I think esynergy is a solutions company that happens to use technology, and they do it very well. I think esynergy, and my conversations with Patrick over the years, esynergy is an impact business, and what they do is they go into very gnarly situations and fix stuff. And I've seen that happen again and again, so I'm a fan. This whole scenario, me standing here in front of you, started in the weirdest possible way, right? You know, when you do a tiny thing, you have no idea of the consequences of it. So this whole thing with McKinsey, so this started with McKinsey published an article a little while ago about measuring developer productivity. And I remember two things. I remember reading about the first two paragraphs of this article and thinking, what a crock of nonsense. What unutterable just noise. This is ridiculous, right? And this plays into my hypothesis, which is that there are a bunch of former accounting firms that really should have stayed in their lane. So you get these big four, and they're brilliant. Don't get me wrong, they're brilliant at accounting, right? That's what they started with. They're really good at auditing when they're not kind of lying and stuff. And then what happened is about, I don't know, 20 years ago, maybe a bit longer, they moved into management consulting because they were doing management accounting, and both of them have the word management in. So, we can just slide into management accounting. They're not very good at it, right? It's been my experience, allegedly. I've got to use the word allegedly, right? Otherwise they come for me. And then, but I don't know much about management consulting, or I didn't then. I know quite a lot about technology. And then they started to reinvent themselves as technology consultancies. And I know for a fact they're rubbish at that. Okay. And so they produced this article. Anyway, I'm just like, it's more noise, right? Because there's lots of noise that comes out. And someone asked me to do a podcast around that time. So I thought, okay, I'll do a podcast. And I thought, usually when I do a podcast, my prep for the podcast is, are we on yet? Right? And this one, they said specifically, we want to talk about this McKinsey article because like Kent Beck's got involved and a bunch of other folks have got involved and you've had a few opinions. Do you want? And I thought I should probably read the whole article, right? That seems reasonable. So I read the whole article, and as I was going along, I just made notes. And that's just how I read something if I'm trying to understand it. I just make, I'm a touch typist, so I'm reading the thing, I'm typing notes at the same time. And anyway, so then I did this podcast. I don't remember whose podcast it is, so I'm ever so sorry if it's yours. But it was great, a lovely chat. And then afterwards, I'm like, I've got all these notes. I could just turn these notes into an article. So I wrote this basically critique, and it kind of wrote itself. It wasn't like I didn't sit there and spend hours and hours on it. I just kind of turned all of my notes. Each of my bullets was a heading, and I just put a paragraph under it. Anyway, this thing sort of developed a life of its own. And here we are. And most of it was like, I'm a bit cross about some things. I'm a bit cross about how they appropriated all the DORA and space research that Dr. Nicole Forsgren, who is an utter legend, did and led. And then they decided not to mention her. And I have a bunch of reasons why I think that is. Not least that her name is Nicole rather than Dave. But anyway, so, right, let me try and keep this reasonably contained. Developer productivity then, what's motivating? I mean, apart from, McKinsey and friends kicking off about developer productivity, where does it come from? Right? Why do we start asking these questions? And it's usually that someone senior in the organization is saying, you cost too much, you're too slow to do stuff. So we're talking about time to value, we're talking about the operating cost of an organization, or they're doing we've got to reduce headcount, who should we cut? Right? Who are our least productive people? And they think of they've got this sort of factory metaphor in their head of who are the most and least productive people. I'm looking across at my good friend Anna Urbaniak, who is a delivery goddess, right? If you want something big and gnarly delivered, she's your man. Really, really poor productivity, delivers almost no code, right? We'll get rid of her, she's out. I wrote a follow-up article to this McKinsey thing called The Worst Programmer I Know, and I outed my buddy Tim McKinnon on account of he delivers 0 story points and 0 features ever. Because what he's doing is he's going around, Kate's nodding, she's worked with Tim, right? He's going around raising the bar of the entire team, right? Any team with Tim in will be measurably better than any team without. And this comes to what I think is the crux of this whole thing, is that we're trying to take a reductionist approach to a holistic problem. The holistic problem is, how can we be faster, better, cheaper, whatever it is? The reductionist approach is, if I look at the individual components of an engine, I can blame that piston. And it doesn't really make sense to have that as kind of category error. So, and then I want to jump into the panel because I'm very excited about this. But before we do this, I think there's a point of order. And the point of order is this. Martin Fowler, about 100 years ago, wrote this wonderful article about you cannot measure productivity. I think that's a cop-out, right? And the reason I think that's a cop-out, with my slightly grown-up hat on for a minute, is this word governance. Okay, who here is involved in any way with governance or runs into governance? Okay, hands in the air. Right, I'm going to tell you a secret. Okay, it's taken me a long time to figure this out, and I love sharing it with people. Governance is 2 things. It's 2 things. Governance is no more than 2 things, okay? What are we spending our money on? How's it going? That's the whole of governance. The reason you get governance theatre and entire operations built around governance is that in any large organization, it's almost impossible to answer the question, what are we spending our money on? And even harder to answer the question, how's it going? Right? So my suggestion, my proposal, is to simplify what you're doing to make those 2 questions, or the answers to those 2 questions, easier, rather than trying to jump through all the convoluted hoops and lying about why you're doing it in the first place. So you absolutely should be able to answer those grown-up, 27th floor, whatever. Oh, we're on the 35th anyway, aren't we? Floor questions of, what are we spending our money on? How's it going? How can we run cheaper? How can we run faster? How can we reduce time to value? How can we improve quality, right? Those are proper questions. If you can't answer those questions, you don't get to spend my money, right? If you can't understand why we hire all these smart people and it still takes forever to get stuff done, then you shouldn't be doing it. You should be doing a different thing. Yeah. So those are really interesting questions. And this is what I'm really interested in unpacking on this panel this evening. So I'm going to shut up now. What I don't want to do, and I think it's not fair for anyone on this panel to do, is dodge the actual question. So we do need to measure some stuff. What should we be measuring? What are some of the unintended consequences of measuring the wrong things? And what might be a much more useful, actionable answer to better, faster, cheaper, where's my money going? So that's all I've got. I believe I'm now supposed to hand over to Leo, who's going to be our responsible adult for the evening.
Thanks, Daniel. For those who haven't met me before, my name's Leo Ijebor, and I'm a technology principal at esynergy. Well, I feel like today my job might be trying to stop Daniel from talking about McKinsey anymore. So I started my career in technology, and I've done a master's in finance as well, and I've spent the rest of my career trying to figure out how can I as a developer become more efficient, and then how can I lead teams that are going to be efficient at delivering business outcomes. At esynergy, we see a topic which comes up a lot, and Daniel has in fact already mentioned, which is that companies now as ever are under continuous pressure for costs, competition, and the desire to do more with less. So it's a real great opportunity for us as esynergy to be able to speak to such esteemed experts about the ways that they try to address that problem. So without further ado, I'll start to introduce the panelists. So Neha, Giorgos, and Doug, do you want to come and join? And we'll go down the line and do a brief introduction to each.
Hi, I'm Neha. I've spent most of my career doing Agile delivery, program management, product operations, different things with the similar title. I love to solve problems like what are we doing, how are we spending our money, and when are we going to finish these things. I'm just recently finished at JustEat Takeaway, where I was the head of technical planning and reporting.
So my name is Giorgos. Obviously, I'm not from Greece. My name implies that. I live in London for the last 15 years. I'm a technologist, software engineer for the last 19 years, servant leader, engineering leader, and a product builder as well. I just finished as well, so we're both unemployed, as it seems now. From Tide Financial Services Platform, and I joined Tide very early, 25th employee. Stayed there for 7 years, and I'm taking a small break before I start my new role at LHV back in September.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm about 30-something years into this. Roughly first 10 years was kind of cutting code. Second 10 years was consulting with ThoughtWorks, so working with other people, cutting code. And then the last 10-ish years has been as an independent mischief maker going into companies and causing trouble. What I heard is this incredible woman is available for hire. That's what I just heard, right? Just if that passed you by. Yeah, and I don't know what happens next.
Hi, I'm Doug. Oh, it's a bit loud. So I started off my career supporting software, got fed up with supporting rubbish written by other people, so I decided to write my own stuff. Currently work for ClearBank, who abstract the complex nature of banking infrastructure out to simple to use APIs. I'm the director of engineering there, looking after our financial crime and all our operations tooling. Previous companies have been JustEat with Neha and JustGiving, where I think you did a stint. Yep, and Top Table, Open Table, where I worked with Paul over there.
Great, thanks very much. So that brings us on to the point that we've got an interesting opportunity now with two of you going into new organizations to ask, what is it you're going to be thinking about in terms of developer productivity when you started a new role? Is it going to feature in your first 100-day plan? How do we increase productivity? Or what are the first things that you're going to be thinking about?
Yeah, so I think with first 90 days, first 100 days, it's the same kind of approach that you take with any other job. What are the problems that our teams are experiencing? Where are the bottlenecks, both from a technical side, a product side, a design UX side as well, and also kind of the processes that either help or hinder. So the way that I like to do that is not only talking to colleagues who are typically like senior leaders as well, but also stakeholders, the people who are using the services and tools that we build. But I generally get the best insights from talking with kind of on-the-ground teams, so engineers who are building the software, our designers, our UX folks, business analysts, product managers, to understand their experiences. And JustEat is a larger company. It's over 2,000 kind of folks in their product and tech function. So for me, it was really important to speak to folks in different departments, especially the folks who were doing kind of platform and infrastructure engineering, who were able to give me really great insights into the kind of foundation of the tools that folks use. So I think it's really just talking to people, reading things, if hopefully you've got good documentation, and starting to kind of get a lay of the land.
Yeah, so I'm actually working on my 90 days plan. Reading this great book is the first 90 days, so I'm working on it now. I'm joining a new organization. I know very few things about it. It's naive for me to say that I know what needs to improve, what I need to improve. I'm definitely a sucker for continuous improvement. So developer productivity, it is on my, probably one of the things that I'm looking at, not because McKinsey says so, or we need to measure it, but because I like to improve continuously. And for sure, every company needs to improve, right? Continuously. So definitely there's going to be things that I will observe for the first 90 days. I don't know the future, like probably Dan as well. But it will be on my radar.
Brilliant. And you mentioned that some of the best conversation you have is about understanding at the working level, what are the impacts that are having, or what things are impacting developer productivity, and what tools and levers do you have within an organization to move them. So I'd like to ask everybody else, do you have thoughts on, is there an owner to developer productivity? Is it something that comes from the top down? Is it something which you try to get everybody in the organization to get a buy-in to? And if so, how do you find that you can bring on that cultural change that makes everybody care about developer productivity?
I think it does kind of come from the top down. You need someone to give you guidance. You need a bigger vision to head towards. So more, getting more more business value out there earlier, quicker, faster. So I do think it starts from the tech leadership at the top and disseminates through the teams.
I mean, this is a lot of what I do, right? So I go into organizations, typically I get invited in because stuff is stuck. And stuff might be stuck in terms of like time to value. It takes a really long time to do things. It might be cost. We've got all this pouring money into this massive IT department and nothing's coming out. I push back on the term developer productivity because I prefer to think of effectiveness, organizational effectiveness. So I've got a bunch of people. And again, this is kind of my take on management as well. You don't manage people, you manage a system of work that has people in it, right? So you manage a value stream that has people in it. So you can have all the local optimization you like of individuals producing stuff, and that has zero impact on the value chain. So one of the things, I'll give you a couple of examples, actually is probably going to help. So one of the places Anna and I were working some years ago, they were saying, we need to go faster, we need to ship stuff faster. And we were saying, well, how long does it take you at the moment? We don't know, but we've got to go faster. Why don't we baseline? Why don't we measure how long things take? And what we learned was two things. We learned that some things only take a couple of weeks. We also learned that the variance was mind-boggling. So some things would take like 2.5 years of being stuck in the pipes, right? But what we had was, it was around a year or something was the mean to get something out, which is eye-wateringly bad, but the variance was like more than double that. And one of the things they said, we've got to build pipeline, because I wrote back in about 100 years ago, I wrote a paper about build pipelines and became like the pipeline guy. So we've got to show you our build pipeline. We're doing these monthly releases. And we were like, yeah, but if you look at the stuff that's in a monthly release, some of that stuff started 2 years ago. We're going to drop back to quarterly releases. And they're like, oh no, we can't do that. Right, but everything in that release started that quarter. So we can now make the statement, anything that you put in the hopper, you'll get in 12 weeks. Okay? And we did that. And then after a couple of quarters, they got the hang of that. So we brought it down to 2 months, down to 1. So within a year, we were back down to monthly releases. But now everything in there was like taking 4 weeks. And so it's when you start turning the lights on and looking at where the work is and where the work gets stuck. And, you know, hot headline or whatever, hot take, the work doesn't ever get stuck with people typing. Right, the work doesn't ever get stuck with Git commits. Right, that's not where the work gets stuck. The work gets stuck with coordination costs, with time zones, with multiple things coming out of multiple teams, with different forces acting on them and different priorities and different people tapping them on the shoulder. Can you just do this one thing for me? And this one team over there is doing your thing, and your thing's number 2 on the list, and it's been number 2 on the list for the last 6 months because everything else keeps hopping over it, and it's still number 2 on the list. That's why things get stuck, right? And when you start panning back and looking at the system of work, you suddenly get insights into how to make things go, I mean, mind-bogglingly faster. I've probably measured countless value streams over decades, and I have never yet found a business process, be it sales order processing, a return, shipping a feature, whatever it is, that was less than 90% water. Right? You know, we're spending 10% or less, often 3 or 4% of the time doing the work. The other 90-something% with the work all just getting stuck, and we're obsessing about the 4%. Right? We're totally looking in the wrong place.
Interesting. And I think I want to bring that back to something which you mentioned at the start as well, which is that people tend to start thinking about developer productivity when they see that there's some kind of inefficiency. Right? And that inefficiency can either be real or it can be perceived. Right? A lot of us in the room, I'm sure, have been engineers at points, and we've had senior management who've told us that things aren't happening fast enough, but they don't understand the intricacies of what it is that we're developing, or perhaps there's not the right communication channels and understanding. So I'd like to hear from the panel about how do we address that kind of perception gap between what developer productivity actually is and what people think it is. Is it just that we need to show them DORA metrics or Agile flow metrics, or how can we go about really building that trust and perception of developer productivity in an organization?
I think the DORA metrics are really important because it's an indicator of what you're releasing, but just because you're releasing something doesn't mean you're actually releasing value to the business. And I think that's the important thing. So making sure that what you're releasing is actually value to the business is really important. And some people think, oh, but I was just tidying up the code. But if you're making things quicker and faster to release the next time, then that's business value.
Sorry, you just reminded me, there's a story about Kent Beck joined Facebook some years ago, worked there for a while. And he was just in there, you know, his first few days or whatever, and he was just monkeying around in code, and he was just looking at this stuff, and it was just like, just looked at him as just ugly code. I'm going to tidy up this code. And he was just, you know, 'cause he's Kent, so he's writing some tests, and he's refactoring the code and moving on and blah. You know, about a year later, he'd been there for about a year, and some senior ops person came up and said, "Are you Kent Beck?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Dude, you just saved us like $5 million in OPEX." He's like, "What do you mean?" "Oh, you changed some code that was on like a critical part of our ad platform, and it saved $5 million in data center operating, like CPU cycles." Was like, so, you know, the tidying up stuff is like, you think you're making this little tidy thing. No, what you're doing is it has a bottom line economic impact.
That's brilliant. And actually, it brings us on to a question which was asked in advance by the audience, which is, you know, along the lines of, you call it mucking around, but we might call it innovation, you know? So when we're nice like that, right? Such a consultant, thanks very much. But so, you know...
Mucking around is going on my LinkedIn profile now.
Agile troublemaker who likes to muck around, great. So, you know, we hear a lot about developer productivity. Historically used to be thought of as a bit of a whip, you know, and some really blunt metrics like lines of code, etc., which were used to try and track individual developers. Then we had this kind of progression onto things like DORA metrics, which really helped to see how are we delivering effective software. But when we're doing anything that we're putting really hard measures on and hard tracking, sometimes that comes at the cost of innovation. And I want to know, you know, what are your feelings on that? Do you think that tracking developer productivity and focusing too hard on metrics can have impacts on innovation? Or do you think it's actually something which helps us to get to innovation by delivering faster?
So definitely the second one. I think that what you get is freedom through constraint. Right, so for folks, I don't know, I mean, we're kind of talking about Dora as everyone knows Dora. Just to set some context, so Dora is DevOps research, DevOps research and assessment is what Dora stands for, was Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble, Gene Kim. What happened was the company called Puppet Labs used to do like a DevOps research, a DevOps state of DevOps report every year. And it was like a survey. It was a really informal survey. They send it out, they get the things back, and they publish it on their website, a nice bit of marketing. And then Nicole got involved, right? Nicole's a proper academic, and she looks at this thing and said, this is rubbish. your survey is rubbish. What do you mean it's rubbish? Well, your questions are rubbish. Your methodology is rubbish. Everything about it. There's nothing defensible in this. So she shook it up. It's about 2015, 2016, turned it into a proper actual survey, like an academically robust survey. And off the back of that, and this is the mad thing, if you haven't read Accelerate, which is the book kind of behind Dora, if you like, it is absolutely worth reading. What she proved, and like I'm using the word deliberately, defensively, academically defensively proved a causal link between doing a bunch of sensible DevOps things and bottom line business profit. Right? You will make more money if you do these things. And it's probably the only science in the history of Agile software, right? Honestly, in like 20, 30 odd years. It's brilliant. And then she went on and did a bunch of other metrics called SPACE, which is another acronym, around individual effectiveness, but not developer productivity. And this is where, again, McKinsey lifted these terms, corrupted them in a stupid paper. Oh, it's my out loud voice again. But the point of it was about how, and it's things like happiness, right? Things like whether someone's having fun at work, right, really affects whether they're effective, which isn't, when you say it out loud, it's not that surprising. I don't know where I was going with this, but I was getting quite cross about Dora.
I think.
Sorry. Innovation through constraint. So when you like Netflix said, right, we want to drive down our costs in Amazon, right? Big Amazon customer, huge Amazon bill. And so they said, how do we drive down our costs in Amazon? And one of the things they said is, well, often we spin up a bunch of servers preemptively because we're expecting some burst in activity, right? Burst in whatever. And that costs an awful lot of money to have idle servers sitting there. And also after this burst, it costs a lot of money to not shut them down. So what happens? A bunch of folks in there come up with this predictive algorithm that predicts when they're going to need burst. They don't know why. They don't know why it's going to need, but it's always right. And so ahead of this burst, they spin a bunch of things up. After it predicts the burst going to go down, they spin them down. They save like hundreds of millions of dollars. Right? I mean, mind-boggling amounts of money. That's innovation. Innovation is we have this constraint. Make this cost less. Make this faster. Right? And when you do that, you get incredible innovation coming out.
And speaking, about costs. So obviously one thing that we care about a lot is the cost of the machines that you're running. But another, and normally the bigger cost in a technology organization, is the people who are typing on the keyboards to run those machines. So I wanted to ask Neha.
Narrator. No, it isn't.
Okay. So I wanted to ask Neha about, in terms of planning, do you find that there's pressure always to justify the cost of development and really to, there's always a very sort of strong need for you to prove why it is that the cost is being spent?
Yeah, for sure. Engineering is expensive as a function/department if you're looking at kind of your company's financial statements. But also I would include product UX and delivery and program managers in that as well. Because if you have technical or product in front of your title, you tend to be able to command a higher salary. It's really important, I think, to know what your stakeholders are feeling and where their kind of pain points are. So if you're getting pressure on developer productivity from someone in sales, what are their challenges? Maybe it's they're getting hammered by some of their competitors. So you can talk about developer productivity in terms of this is going to enable us to deploy things faster so that you can get features out to customers more quickly. Or this is going to make it more reliable so that you're getting less complaints from customers. And being able to kind of craft the story using things like Dora metrics or any other metrics that are relevant kind of for you as well. Having a general sense of what the company is performing and what the economy is like helps you, I think, kind of dive into how I hate that word, developer productivity, as if we're all just sitting there typing, like, oh, I only did 30 lines of code today, so guess I'm getting the boot. But it's not necessarily outputs, it's outcomes, right? And that's how you want to be talking to people. I need to spend 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever, deprecating this legacy tech because it's increasing our risk of getting fined by some agency. Well, legal's going to understand that. Or I need to spend this so that we can have a more reliable service. Sales tend to understand that as well.
And I think, you mentioned in your opening remarks about your good friend Tim and what a bad developer he is, right? He's rubbish. I'm sure he's not. At least somebody's defending Tim here. And what I find interesting, especially when I was working very, very hands-on in engineering, was that a lot of the work that we do as engineers, as you've rightly mentioned, isn't about just bashing on a keyboard, right? It's thought work. It's about developing other engineers within your organization and taking time to develop your engineering capability as an organization. Now, that comes kind of in contrast to some of the metrics that people use in organizations, which don't really, take that into consideration. And I think that's the point you were making, that according to some metrics, Tim would be the worst developer you've ever met. Now, do any of you have ways of tracking that kind of intangible impact that developers have to an organization? Or is it just something that you talk about? And if so, is there a way that you have of articulating the benefits that these developers bring to an organization? Maybe Giorgos?
So, impact, how do you measure impact, basically? That's the question. And I think it's one of the hardest things. It's not tangible, right? When I did the growth framework, one of the first growth framework I did, we had two basically main levels, the junior to senior level, and then we have staff engineers and above. And it was very clear that if you're going to become a staff engineer, your technical skill knowledge will start plateauing. So how do you grow? And impact was one of them, but then we had trouble figuring out how to measure impact, right? You can't do that with, through Jira. But you can do that through 360 feedback. You can do that through, communication, collaboration with others. So it's a bunch of other metrics, which I can't go into detail now, but you can put together and figure out whether Leo actually is an impactful engineer. And I think the impact doesn't come from you, it comes from the others. Like, they are the ones assessing your impact. That's what we did at Tide.
Can I add that the product metrics are actually really important, the product that you're releasing? Those should show the value of the code that the developers are releasing. And a lot of the time, the product metrics aren't in place. They're there, but they're vanity metrics. It's, look at this number, it's growing. But if that metric doesn't make you think we need to change something, or this is not going in the right direction, then that metric's no good. So the product metrics have to tie into the developer metrics as well.
I also want to add that, one, I think it's really important that if you are kind of going through that transformation of becoming more data-driven, that folks at every level know what you're kind of being measured on and how the business is measuring you, and also that they know how to kind of calculate that as well. I think it's also really important not just to look at, to kind of bounce off of what Doug was saying with product metrics, like, oh, we launched this thing and 10% converted. Well, what happens 3 months down the line, a year down the line? You have to be constantly kind of looking at the data and understanding what story it's telling you and what that means for the rest of the business as well.
And also, metrics need to have some guardrails, because otherwise people just do the silly thing like an ops person, average handling time, hello, hang up. So you need guardrails around those metrics as well.
I think it's worth differentiating between like product management and product delivery, product development. So the doing the right thing and doing the thing right. All of the conversation, all of the dialogue around what we're calling developer productivity, which is really about delivery effectiveness, is about doing the thing right. If the thing is the wrong thing, to Doug's point, then doing the wrong thing righter isn't actually going to help you. But also, that should be the separation of responsibilities, right? So I want someone to tell me that we're building, medical monitoring real-time systems, right? And I'm going to go and try and build really good medical real-time monitoring systems. I'm not going to build a pizza delivery system. If it turns out that we're doing this inside Domino's, right, they're going to be really cross that they have these incredible monitoring systems and no pizzas, right? So I think it's so again, I'm going to keep name checking Anna because she's sitting in the audience, Anna Urbaniak. We were working at John Lewis a few years ago, and the very first thing we did, we had 90 people, I think 100 people working in John Lewis's online operation, and there were about a dozen teams or whatever, and all kind of pulling in different directions. And that's why one of the reasons they asked me to come in, they said, look, we've got these brilliant people, but they're pulling in different directions. Can we get them all pointing the same way? And we spent a bunch of time getting them pointing the same way. And the first thing that happened was like they're going, oh no, he's going to make us all do a thing, right? The thing will be like Kanban, or the thing will be Scrum, or there'll be a thing. I hate it when the external guy comes in and tells us to do the thing. And so I came in and said, right, what are you all doing? Oh, we're all building software. Right, carry on, yeah? What I want is every 2 weeks, on a 2-week cadence, we want 3 numbers. We want throughput, how much stuff have you done? How many things? I don't know what, whatever you define a thing as, how many of them did you get done? Lead time. How long is it taking you to do one of those things you just told me about? Right? And work in process. How many things are you currently working on? Each team had a different definition of what a thing was, necessarily. The mobile folks and the web folks and the payments folks and the whatever else were all doing completely different things. And I said, how are we going to work? I said, well, however you want, right? I don't care how you work. Every 2 weeks, on a cadence, we want those 3 numbers. For some of those teams, they're like, oh, great, I've got those numbers in my back pocket. For some of the teams, they're like, what the hell is lead time? And so, there's a lot more kind of intervention or a lot more. And within not very long, we had a dozen teams, went up to 20 teams. I think there are now 500 people in their online operation, all working to a cadence. Anna built this brilliant visual wall. You could see everything moving through the system. You could see where things were stuck. You could see where things were accelerating. You could see trends, right? All of this stuff just off 3 numbers across a bunch of people. So delivery effectiveness is, again, it's one of these deceptively easy things to switch the lights on. We just tend to switch on the wrong lights. We're looking in the wrong place, right? Product effectiveness, all bets are off. I know some really good product people. I'm not one of them. I can talk a good product game, but I am not a bake the right cake. Don't ask me which cake we're baking. If you ask me to bake a cake, I'll bake you a really good cake, right? But don't ask me about which cake.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Now, one thing I want to take a slight aside, right? Because the year is 2024. This is a technology-related conversation, and we haven't mentioned the letters A and I in that sequence so far. Now, one thing that keeps coming up again and again and again in the news, everywhere that you sort of turn, is about the impact of AI coding assistants, Devin, AI engineers. What's the reality in your views behind that? Does that have a big impact on developer productivity now? Will it in the future? And what does that journey kind of look like? Is it something you think about in your organizations at the moment? And what kind of ways do you have of embedding that?
Yeah, so in Q1 this year, I actually set all of my team's objectives to use GitHub Copilot. And they had to write an executive summary on it, write what was good, what was bad. And there was no quantifiable metrics, but I wanted to get an idea of what people thought of it. And by putting it in the objectives, it meant the company had to carve out time for people to do it. Because if you expect it as a side project, then less than 1% of people are going to do it. Setting it as their objectives meant everyone had to do it. And the feedback was amazing, from this is no better than ReSharper to, oh my word, this thing knows what I want to do when I'm writing SQL.
And what's your summary? What did you learn? As a technology leader, what did you learn?
I learned, do not give this tool to associates. It has to be used by someone who knows what they're doing. So giving it to an associate is like having a co-pilot in an aircraft who can't actually fly and saying you take the controls. It generally doesn't work. So the people have to know what they're doing before they can use AI, because it hallucinates. So they have to know whether it gave them the right answer or not, and it was just quicker to get to that answer.
That's interesting. So one of my side hustles is I do Snark on LinkedIn. I think I'm very excited about Gen AI, but I'm very excited in a Emily Bender kind of stochastic parrot kind of way. I think that calling it intelligence is a massive misstep, right? It's not intelligent. It's just very, very good at guessing, right? It's a thing that produces things that look like answers to things that look like questions, right? It's very, very good at pattern matching. the Gen AI tools that I think are going to win are going to be the ones that help people do work better. So the whole business trajectory of trying to replace humans, I think, is a complete hiding to nowhere. It's a better eSharper, it's a better IntelliJ, it's a better, it's really good at predicting where I'm likely to go. Those tools, I think, are going to be the ones that win. It will not be replacing junior developers anytime soon, /ever. I was saying today, for me, the analogy is like, it's Gen AI is as close to artificial general intelligence as an abacus is to a water vole, right? So, it's a really cool tool. It's not intelligent in any meaningful sense. The tools that we can build to help folks get work done better, I think the potential there is enormous. And the organisations, the companies, the investors who are looking there, I think they're going to win.
Great. Any views from you, Giorgos, or Neha?
Yeah. No, go on.
I did find that a lot of people seem to use ChatGPT for end-of-year performance reviews because ChatGPT writes in American English and we are in the United Kingdom. So I noticed program with one M, for example. I think it's really important to figure out what are the problems that we're trying to solve and how might AI help us, and have kind of guardrails and metrics in place to kind of measure the effectiveness of AI in solving that. And it's important for senior folks to use, for sure, but also I think when you're ready to kind of scale that out, what is your plan for doing so? How are you going to help junior engineers know when to use ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot or any other solution versus not? But I did find that it's great for things like Jira and like performance reviews and other admin tasks that folks don't like to do.
Yeah, I think there's two things. One is every few years, decades, there's something comes out and people are panicking that we're going to lose a job. The truth is that nobody. I mean, yes, things change. Where the way you used to code back in the 80s. I mean, when I started doing coding in university in the 90s, I was writing on paper, debugging on paper. Don't do that anymore. I'm assuming, I don't know the future, but I'm assuming something like this will happen in the future, like things will be slightly easier for developers. No one will replace anyone. And the key thing is people need to realize that AI will not do your job, full stop. It will help you to accelerate how to do your work or improve how you do your work, but it won't replace the full output, right? I mean, I don't know the future as well.
There's a paradigm shift that I've been waiting for 30 odd years, right? And I still haven't seen it. And there's a brilliant talk, and I'm going to forget the guy's name now. But the thing we've been doing, well, when I first started computering at university, which is in the late 80s, we were typing stuff into computers, and it's now 2024, and the way I do programming is I type stuff into computers, and the stuff I type is largely the same as the stuff I was typing. I have some tools that help me type more. The fact that we're typing text into a two-dimensional thing on a computer thing now, I don't know what replaces it, but bloody hell, it can't be the most effective way of getting the computer to do things, right? And asking ChatGPT to do the typing for you just seems like solving the wrong problem. So I don't know what that shift is, but that's what I'm excited to see.
Brilliant. And I think, maybe leaving AI behind for a minute, maybe not, because it divides the room, certainly. I think one thing we can all agree on is that developer productivity isn't just the sum of developers and engineers doing work. We've already talked about, your product management and your product development has to be aligned in terms of, are we building the right thing? Now, another thing that we notice a lot as well is that organizations really need to be set up in the right way to let their developers be effective. And what I mean by that is if you have an organization where priorities are constantly changing, where direction is changing, etc., it doesn't matter if you're going at 100 miles an hour if the direction has changed, right? So have you got experiences or things that you'd like to talk about in terms of making sure that what impact you can have within the engineering space to ensure that the organization is there supporting you, helping you, and understanding how you're going to deliver effectively? No.
I think there's two things here. I think there's two things here. One is knowing what effective looks like. The other is basically the work I do, or most of the work I do, which is around business agility. And when I use the term business agility, I use it in a very specific meaning, very specific definition, which is the ability of an organization to recognize feedback and respond effectively to feedback. So if you can't do both of those, you do not have agility, whatever else you think you have. If you're not receiving that feedback, which means you're soliciting that feedback and you're hearing that feedback, you don't have any forces acting on you to change. If you cannot do anything about that feedback, your call is important to us, right? Nothing's going to change. And a lot of what I do is help an organization on a technical side and on a process and organization and structural side. And what I've learned over a bunch of years is it's never one thing, right? It's all of those things. So a bunch of those things, they're all necessary but not sufficient. So having great technology leaders, great technology organization is meaningless. Exactly what you were saying, Doug, about if you're building the wrong thing, right? If you can't then respond to change, if you can't respond to your competitors suddenly, broadsiding you or whatever, blindsiding you, then you're going to get eaten alive. So it's you need to be able to pivot all of those things, and that's hard.
I'd like to add that the context switching is a killer. So if you can set up your teams so that, say, for each sprint, there are one or two people who are focused on context switching. So their job is to do all the context switching while the other people are just focusing on one thing. That can really help. It's not popular when you're the one who's context switching, but when you have 6 weeks off, you love it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think with timing, we better go on to some questions and answers. So I think there's a microphone at the back. Are there any questions in the audience that they'd like to address to the panel?
Feel free to raise. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'll beg to disagree with the gentleman. I can't remember his name with the hat on. Okay, right. Sorry. I read economics and applied statistics for first degree. I went into computing about the same period in life when you went into computing. Okay, and I went into Unix C and Oracle systems, backend systems. I mean, obviously, we're in 2024 now. The paradigm has changed completely. Now, what I discovered was in the last couple of years, okay, my line manager told me about AI. I thought it was just, there's every paradigm shift every 5 to 10 years in IT, so I just thought it was one of those phases it was going through. Then until something happened a few weeks ago, when in 25 minutes, Gen AI generated a code to web scrap a government website and went across the layer 7 protections. Okay, ingress, that was frightening. I've never seen that before. Even the libraries that were used by the Python code is not publicly available. Where did Gen AI get it from? Do you see the picture I'm painting?
I do. It's still what's called a stochastic parrot. It's still very, very good at mimicking things. Yeah. So where did it get that from? Yeah. Probably a bunch of companies who shouldn't have had that stuff and who had that stuff, and it got slurped into a large language model because the model for OpenAI and others, as publicly stated, is we only have a business model if we steal all of the IP of everyone we possibly can, with zero regard for licenses, zero regard for payment, zero regard for ownership, zero regard for any of those things. That is the business model. That's the stated business model. And it turns out if you carry out theft on that scale, people don't come for you, which is kind of cool if you're OpenAI or if you're Microsoft. And unfortunately, that's the game. What that means is that once you've got all of those inputs in the machine and you ask it questions, it can produce things that look a lot like answers. If you then overlay that with your clearly enormous depth of knowledge, enormous experience in that space, you can then massage that pretty good sketch into the thing you want. And it looks a lot like magic, right? And this is what Gen AI can do. And the various generations of, the llamas and the whatever else that are out there, are phenomenally good at producing things that look like answers to things that look like questions. What they don't know is how to program. What they don't know is how to understand a business requirement. What they don't know is how to learn in any meaningful sense of learn. What they're very, very good at is taking a vast, vast data set and navigating that data set into things that look like solutions. And so, yeah, if I've got a huge, gnarly, ugly SQL thing that I'm trying to unpack, that's exactly what I'm going to throw at it. And there is enormous value in those tools. And this is what I say, the tools that will help humans, smart, experienced, adult individuals, solve problems by doing loads and loads of the legwork. And the legwork might be slurping in thousands of stored procs of thousands of lines each. So you're looking at millions of lines across a bank or whatever. Making sense of those and doing a lot of that lifting for me, fantastic. But I'm not going to put that into production and bet my bank on it.
Just to comment on a couple of things that were mentioned. You said engineers in our organisation, and you said our engineers. Again, you used the word ownership. A lot of organisations out there, and I have the pleasure/misfortune for having worked for a few of them, they're not our engineers. They're emphasis engineers, they're TCS engineers, they're cognizant engineers. They are outsourced to third parties, to fourth parties. But the same questions still apply from the top. Things are too slow, things cost too much. So when it comes into that kind of context, when you're speaking to the business who wants stuff, and they want it sooner, safer, faster, happier, and all the rest of it, how do you look to try and improve the performance of engineers that you don't own?
Exactly the same way you do with all the other engineers, is my answer. And we've done this. So I was working, again, John Lewis, a whole load of the engineering operation was outsourced. And it was very, pointy, clicky, very kind of manual, blah, that kind of stuff. I won't name names. We were rolling out a program of training around test automation and TDD and trying to get a bit more kind of assurance around some of the big systems. And we put all of the external folks through exactly the same training, exactly the same stuff as we did all the internal folks, because they're all part of a system of work that is trying to get stuff done. If you don't take that model, then whatever the thing is that you're excluding is necessarily going to become the next bottleneck.
I've been agency side, so I've been the outsourced team member. What I can say from experience in a way to kind of improve efficiency on a practical sense is clearly written requirements and kind of communication, those basics that would be required in any company internally are really important for bridging the gap. Being also clear, I think, on how you're measuring their effectiveness. So is it the output that they've created? Is it the quality? Is it both? Are they meeting those metrics? And talking to them and having that dialogue back and forth is also, I think, an easy way to kind of get the ball rolling. But there's also a wider discussion with the rest of your leadership team of, we are spending X amount of pounds on this resource, on this company, and it is not providing value for us. Is it time to re-examine kind of things? Would also be, I think, a conversation worth having. It's really hard when you're the outsourced entity. I've also had the pleasure of working with folks who have outsourced, and it requires effort on your part to make sure that they're being effective. You have to help kind of clear some of the bottlenecks if they might not necessarily be proactive in saying like, oh, we don't have an answer to this problem. Be proactive and ask them, what's blocking you? How can I help you be more effective? What are things that we can do to make communication easier? Does this work for you? That kind of dialogue back and forth. But it's a transaction at the end of the day. You have a contract with these folks. That is also something you can kind of leverage if they're not providing you the output and outcomes that you're looking for.
Help you, help us thing is huge.
Emotional engagement. If you treat them like your own employees, they're more likely to be emotionally engaged. And if they're emotionally engaged with the product they're developing, they're going to enjoy it more and they're going to create better products.
Has the panel seen mental health, burnout, etc., impacting their teams and their developer experience, and what are they doing about it?
pandemic was hard for folks. That includes folks in product and tech efforts. I've seen kind of work-life balance be kind of challenging as well. It's really easy for me personally to just keep working, but actually I'm more effective if I rest and recharge, and I have to remember that, and then also make sure the folks that I'm working with remember that as well. I also think there's sometimes, not all companies, but many companies, you have so many meetings that you're trying to squeeze a full day of work into a 1 hour time slot, or maybe you have meeting 30-minute break, meeting 30-minute break. As leaders, we can kind of influence that. Like, cancel a useless meeting today and watch kind of morale improve. And there's some great books, like How to Fix Meetings is a good one, which can give you like practical steps, but also culturally as leaders, we should be asking ourselves, are we creating the environment for folks to do their best? And if not, how can we help them? Who do we need to influence? Who do we need to ask for budget? I also just want to shout out Mental Health First England. It does great training specifically for managers and leaders on how to kind of cultivate a workplace that has great mental health, but also how to spot folks who might be struggling as well.
I think one more thing we can do as a leaders is actually lead by example. And when pandemic hit, obviously we had to change how we do things. For me, I started thinking, how can what I do, how I behave, impact my teams and my people. And I actually started being, I'm an introvert by, usually, so I don't like talking about the things that I do, but I actually switched completely and I started being very vocal about the things that I do, even the small things that I started running every day. I put on my calendar as an out of office, not because I wanted everybody to know that not because I wanted to brag about running, it was because basically for everybody to see that I'm taking the time out of the day to do running. And I do it like literally about everything now. I'm very transparent on how I behave at work, not because I want to, it's because I want others to see me. Because surprisingly, people look up to me for some reason, I don't know why.
On the leading by example, also, if your manager is sending you messages at 9 o'clock at night, you feel obliged to respond to them. So what you can do is just schedule that message, even if you're working, schedule your message to not be delivered until their working day.
Yeah, people do what you do. So if you work late and you have that culture of like macho big hours thing, then that's what you're going to build around you. If you are, and exactly what you're saying, Joyce, if you're saying like I'm leaving because it's my kid's school prize giving, I'm leaving because I'm doing the school run today, like I'm leaving because I'm a human being that has stuff, that gives the rest of your team permission to leave, to be human beings. I have a theory that we have no worse mental health issues now than we've ever had. What I think is happening now is people are talking about it. It's less taboo, which is brilliant because, and again, it's visualizing, right? It's turning the lights on. We always had this. People were always burning out. People were always under pressure. People were always trying to be someone completely different at work. They're introverts and they're forced to kind of stand up and give talks in front of hundreds of people that exhaust them and terrifies them. All of that. It's now okay to say, do you know what? I hate doing that. And can someone else do that for me? And I think that the fact that we're even having the conversation is brilliant. Right? I don't know what the answer is, and I suspect the answer is different in every single context, necessarily different in every single context, and the fact that people in those different contexts are exploring it is brilliant.
If you're not sure what kind of mental health services your company offers, please talk to your benefits or HR team. And if you don't have any, please use your political capital to kind of advocate for it and make sure that your folks are aware of that. I think so many folks aren't necessarily aware of all the mental health things that a company provides. One of the ways you can help that is by making sure folks in your kind of area are aware of that.
Any more questions at the front?
I have heard, or I believe, that IBM has basically dropped every line of code they've ever written into open source. And I'm sort of interested in this idea that it's almost like when I see people taking pictures out the shard, it's how many of the same picture already exists? How many pieces of code have you written where you've written it on a different platform, for example, but it's the same function? And if a massive amount of functionality is now available where I can ask for functionality that does X and receive it from a quality code base. How will that affect developer productivity?
So there's two parts there. One is, and it was an idea that was bubbling around for a while. It's gone quiet. I hope it's gone quiet because it's maturing rather than it's just died off. Was the idea of language workbenches, and what's his name? Charles Simonyi, who's the Hungarian of Hungarian notation, guy that invented Excel and stuff, like employee number 3 at Microsoft or something. Brilliant man. And he kind of developed this idea of a language workbench. And he was saying exactly that. He's saying an algorithm is an algorithm, a calculation is a calculation. Programming languages are a projection of that. I can project that into C++, I can project it into Python. It doesn't really matter, it's the same thing. And what if you just manipulated the language concepts, the constructs? So it's like domain-driven design on steroids, right? I'm manipulating domain constructs, and now I want to just project this entire solution into C++. Boom, done. Right, and I think that as someone as brilliant as him has been working with, all the people he wants to hire, he's a squillionaire, he can do what he likes, over decades, is still scratching the surface of it, suggests to me that it's a really hard problem. I think it's a really important problem to address. Another thing, which is a bit more fun, is this idea of, a few years ago, a chap called Ivan Moore, who's one of my favourite human beings, he suggested a thing called Pomo Pro, which is postmodern programming. And Pomo Pro is exactly this. He said, I have a theory that all the code we'll ever need has already been written, we just don't have it yet. And so they did a competition, and the competition was, you were given tests, and you had to make the tests pass with code, but the only functions you could use in your IDE were copy and paste. So you could copy code from anywhere on the internet and then paste it, and as soon as the test passed, you were done. And he called it dumpster programming, postmodern programming. And I do think that's a thing. I think there was one word in the middle of that you said that's absolutely crucial, which is quality. I do not know, if I do not know the sources of that code, if I do not know that that is a quality solution to that thing, all bets are off.
We've got time for one more question.
So, totally agree with ecosystem, balancing forces, individuals grabbing AI snippets, helping themselves out. How do we control design coherence in an AI world?
I think, first of all, make sure that you've got kind of brand tone and guardrails, and kind of you've done the work up front to talk about what is our product or feature or service, and what are the kind of constraints around that, so that when we're crafting solutions with AI or without, we know the kind of minimum bar that we should be kind of working towards, both from a technical point of view, but also I think from an experience point of view as well. One of the things that I get really frustrated if I am using AI is that it'll suggest things that we are not able to use within our ecosystem. So having that kind of upfront discussion of what's allowed versus what's not, what isn't allowed. We're adults, but you know what I mean. Helps to kind of make AI easier to use as well.
I think also prompt engineering is actually very critical here. The more details you put into the prompt, the better the outcome will be. You can expect, again, without review, a human eye to actually look at it, to have coherence. But I think the more details you feed into the model, if you want to play with AI for design as well, the more details you put into the prompt, the better the outcome will be. But then again, you have to consolidate across everything.
And yeah, Taiichi Ohno, one of the godparents of Toyota Production System, lean engineering, he had this lovely term, automation. So automation is automation with a human touch. And this is where I think you'll get that coherence, is that if you think of what comes out of any Gen AI tool is a suggestion. It's a suggestion, it's an input, it's not an output. Right, it's an input that a human being then says, oh, that's a really good idea. That's inspired me to do this thing. And the inspired me to do this thing is I just tweaked it up, polished it up a bit and shipped it. Or it might be, that's a really good idea, but the way we do that here is this completely other thing that you don't know about. But thanks for the nudge, because I wouldn't have thought of that. So I think as long as there are humans in the process, in the pipeline, exactly what you're saying here, like the the brand coherence, the product coherence, and then into the technical coherence and the enterprise architecture coherence has to come through human beings.
I just want to add as well, if anyone works with your finance partners on kind of R&D tax claims, both for the UK or any other kind of country, one of the things they often ask you is, were there any other solutions that were available, or how did you kind of arrive to that solution? What a great opportunity to improve your relationships with finance by working together to help them not only craft their kind of claims and forms, but also for you to understand how are other parts of the business evaluating the work and how you build the work as well.
She's really good, and you can hire her.
Brilliant. On that last note, which I think is an important one, thank you very much for sitting here and asking your questions and listening to this great panel of experts. It's been a great pleasure for me, and it's been a great pleasure for eSynergy. We'll all be around, I think, for a little while now for the drink. So if there's any questions that you didn't get the chance to ask now, please do feel free to grab any of the panel and ask your questions now. The drinks will be over there in the next room.